Silence was a rare luxury in my life, one that I had come to cherish in the sprawling confines of my mansion, nestled away from the prying eyes of the public and the press. It was a grand structure, opulent in every sense, a fitting residence for someone of my stature. Jonathan Turnwell, a name that once commanded respect and controversy in equal measure. My days as a prominent politician were behind me, yet the echoes of my influence lingered. The walls of my home were adorned with memorabilia from my career, framed newspaper articles, photographs with dignitaries, and tokens of appreciation from my supporters. Among these were my catchphrases, the words that had become synonymous with my identity. Seal the gates, Devious Douglas, and the one that always brought a wry smile to my face, utter chicanery. Life in solitude was a choice, one I made to escape the relentless scrutiny that came with power. But isolation had its price, and I often found myself longing for the adulation and the adrenaline of my past life. One morning, as I perused through the mail, I noticed a plain envelope, addressed to me in an unfamiliar, almost archaic handwriting. Curious, I slid it open. Inside was a note, a single line that froze me in my tracks. The fence just got 10 feet higher. My own words, thrown back at me. It was unsettling, yet I dismissed it as a prank by a former adversary or a disgruntled staffer. But it was just the beginning. Over the next few days, more letters arrived, each bearing a phrase I had popularized, a taunt hidden beneath the familiarity of my own rhetoric. Devious Douglas never knew what hit him, one read. Another, more ominous, stated, "Malarkey is the mother of deceit." I was unnerved, yes, but also strangely intrigued. Who could be orchestrating such a bizarre charade? It was a late evening when the true nature of my situation revealed itself. I had just retired to my study, a glass of aged scotch in hand, when I noticed something odd about my reflection in the mirror. For a moment, it seemed to shimmer, and then, in the foggy glass, words appeared, as if written by an invisible hand. "Cough awaits." My heart raced. This was no prank. Someone, or something, was in my home, toying with me. I searched the room frantically, but found no one. The house was silent, save for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination perhaps. But deep down, I knew I was facing something far beyond my understanding. The whispers of my past were coming alive in the shadows of my mansion, and I could not escape them. That night, I lay awake, listening to the creaks and groans of the house, each sound a sinister symphony that played upon my fears. My mind raced with questions. Was I being haunted by a vengeful spirit? Or was it my conscience, manifesting the guilt and regrets I had buried deep within? The once comforting solitude of my mansion had turned into a prison, and I was its sole tormented inmate. As the clock chimed midnight, I realized that my secluded sanctuary had become the stage for a chilling, unfathomable mystery, one that I was now compelled to unravel. The following days were a blur of unease and paranoia. Each morning began with the same ritual, a hesitant walk to the mailbox, bracing myself for the next message. The letters kept arriving, each one more cryptic than the last, alluding to my past speeches and decisions. "Malarkey is the foundation of faltering empires," one taunted. They were a constant reminder of my once powerful presence now seemingly turned against me. The mansion, my once cherished haven, felt increasingly oppressive. Corridors that I had walked with pride now seemed to stretch endlessly, as if mocking my solitude. Portraits that I once gazed upon with a sense of accomplishment now appeared to watch me with a mixture of pity and disdain. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows seemed to linger a bit too long, and the silence was often broken by faint, inexplicable noises, a whisper here, a soft thud there, always just out of sight, always just beyond reach. One evening, as I traversed the dimly lit hallway, a sudden cold draft made me shiver. A door, previously unnoticed, stood ajar. I was certain it hadn't been there before, or perhaps I had simply never paid it any attention. My curiosity, mixed with a growing sense of dread, propelled me forward. Inside was a room that defied explanation, walls covered with newspaper clippings about my career, photographs of my rallies, and even some of my personal belongings. In the center stood a mannequin, dressed in a suit eerily similar to one I owned, with a faceless head. Around its neck hung a sign with the words "utter chicanery," one of my favorite sayings. The most chilling aspect, however, was the audio recorder on a small table. I pressed play, and the room filled with my own voice, snippets of speeches and interviews, all out of context, creating a disjointed, haunting monologue. It was as if someone had been collecting pieces of my life, my identity, and twisted them into this grotesque shrine. I left the room feeling violated, as though someone had rifled through my soul and laid it bare in that bizarre chamber. The walls of my mansion no longer offered safety, they were canvas for a twisted artist, using my past as paint. Sleep eluded me. I spent the nights wandering the halls, half expecting to confront an intruder, yet finding nothing but echoes of my own footsteps. The mansion was like a labyrinth, and I, its lost and bewildered minotaur, trapped in a maze of my own making. As the days passed, the incidents grew more brazen. Objects moved of their own accord, and my own recorded voice would sometimes greet me when I entered a room. The words were always the same, phrases I had spoken with confidence and authority, now turned into a sinister chorus mocking my current predicament. I was a prisoner in my own home, a home that had turned against me, echoing my past with every creaking floorboard and whispering wind. My legacy, once a source of pride, had become a haunting specter, and I was left to wonder whether I was losing my grip on reality, or if the very essence of my being was being unraveled by an unseen, malevolent force. The unsettling occurrences in my mansion escalated, each new event more disturbing than the last. My once peaceful nights were now punctuated by nightmares, visions of my past actions and words twisted into. I began to notice changes within the mansion during my restless wanderings. Paintings that once depicted landscapes and portraits were now inexplicably altered. Their subjects seemed to glare at me with accusatory eyes. The very structure of the house seemed to morph subtly, with corridors twisting into unfamiliar configurations, leading me to dead ends and rooms I had never seen before. One particularly harrowing evening, as I roamed the halls, a sudden, sharp noise startled me. Turning a corner, I came upon a scene that stopped me in my tracks. My grand dining room, typically a place of solitude and reflection, was now set for a ghastly feast. The table was adorned with fine china and silverware, but the centerpieces were macabre sculptures crafted from what appeared to be bones and scraps of cloth. At the head of the table sat the faceless mannequin, its presence now a recurring symbol of my torment. As I stood there, frozen in horror, the lights flickered and dimmed, casting eerie shadows across the room. A low murmur filled the air, a cacophony of voices whispering my own catchphrases. "Seal the gates, Devious Douglas, utter chicanery." The words swirled around me, a storm of accusations and mockery. I fled the room, my heart pounding in my chest. The mansion was no longer just reflecting my past, it was reliving it, forcing me to confront the consequences of my actions and words. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was being haunted not by a ghost or a spirit, but by the very essence of my being. My legacy turned against me. The days blurred into a continuous loop of terror and confusion. I stopped venturing outside, fearing what I might find. My meals were taken in my study, the only room that seemed to offer a semblance of normalcy, though even there, I could feel the oppressive weight of the house's judgment. I began to question my sanity, wondering if the isolation and guilt had finally taken their toll. Was I experiencing a breakdown, or was there truly a supernatural force at work, feeding off my fears and regrets? The once grandiose halls of my mansion had become a twisted funhouse, each room a new chapter in my nightmarish ordeal. The whispering voices grew louder, more insistent, as if urging me to acknowledge the sins of my past. But the most chilling realization was yet to come, the notion that I might not be alone in this hellish landscape, that there might be something else residing within these walls, something born from my own hubris and arrogance. The unrelenting hauntings within the walls of my mansion reached a crescendo, each incident more bizarre and terrifying than the last. The once grand corridors now felt like oppressive tunnels, leading me further into a psychological abyss. The air itself seemed thick with a malevolent presence, one that thrived on my growing fear and confusion. As the days passed, my grip on reality began to fray. The line between wakefulness and nightmares blurred, with haunting visions seeping into my every waking moment. I would see fleeting glimpses of figures in the corners of my eyes, hear my name whispered by unseen lips, feel the brush of phantom fingers against my skin. Then came the night of the storm, an evening where nature itself seemed to conspire with the malevolence that had infested my home. Thunder rumbled ominously, shaking the foundations of the mansion, as lightning cast stark fleeting shadows across the rooms. It was during this tempest that I encountered the most harrowing manifestation of my torment. In the midst of the storm, I ventured down to the cellar, driven by a compulsion I couldn't explain. The descent felt like a journey into the very heart of my nightmares. The cellar was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the occasional flash of lightning that penetrated the small windows near the ceiling. As I stood there, in the oppressive gloom, a figure emerged from the shadows. At first, I thought it a trick of the light, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was no illusion. There, standing before me, was a doppelganger, an apparition bearing my likeness, but twisted and distorted, as if reflected in a funhouse mirror. The phantom spoke, its voice a chilling echo of my own, laced with malice and scorn. It recited my catchphrases, "Seal the gates, Devious Douglas," each word dripping with derision. But it was not just mimicking me, it was mocking me, throwing my own words back at me with a venom I had never known. I stood frozen, transfixed by this specter that seemed both part of me and wholly other. It was as though I was staring into a dark mirror, one that reflected not just my image, but the essence of my being. The phantom was the embodiment of my ego, my lust for power, the darker aspects of my personality that I had long refused to acknowledge. The confrontation was more than just a physical encounter, it was a psychological battle. The phantom taunted me with reminders of my controversial past, the decisions I had made, the people I had used and discarded in my climb to power. It accused me of hubris, of believing myself untouchable, above the consequences of my actions. As the storm raged around us, I realized that this entity was not an invader in my home, it was a manifestation of my own conscience, the creation of my deepest fears and regrets. I had become haunted not by a ghost, but by the very legacy I had built. The encounter left me shaken to my core. As the storm abated and the phantom receded into the shadows, I was left with a profound sense of unease. The mansion, my palace of solitude, had become a purgatory, a place where the echoes of my past were inescapable. In that moment, I understood the true nature of my torment. The mansion was not just a house, it was a reflection of my soul, a mirror to the parts of myself I had long sought to ignore. The hauntings were not punishments, they were revelations, forcing me to confront the man I had become. In the wake of the storm and my harrowing encounter with the phantom, a profound change began to take root within me. The mansion, once a symbol of my power and legacy, now stood as a haunting reminder of the man I had once been. The grandeur and opulence that had once comforted me now seemed grotesque, a facade masking the emptiness of my ambitions. The days that followed were a period of deep introspection. I roamed the halls of my mansion, each room a chapter from my past, each artifact a testament to a life driven by power and ego. The whispers and hauntings, once a source of terror, now served as a constant prompt, urging me to reflect on the path I had chosen. I began to realize that the specter I had faced was not just a manifestation of my darkest impulses, but also a call to redemption. It was a chance to confront the parts of myself that I had long denied: the hubris, the arrogance, the callousness with which I had wielded my power. Determined to break free from the chains of my past, I started to make amends. I reached out to old allies and adversaries alike, offering apologies and seeking forgiveness for past transgressions. I devoted myself to philanthropic efforts, using my wealth and influence to support causes I had once ignored or opposed. Yet, the hauntings did not cease. The phantom, the whispers, the shifting shadows, they continued to pervade the mansion, a constant reminder that redemption is not a destination but a journey. Each encounter with the supernatural elements of the house now served as a moment of reflection, a chance to assess the progress I had made and the distance I still had to travel. Despite my efforts, a lingering sense of unease remained. I realized that while I could seek forgiveness from others, the most challenging absolution to attain was self-forgiveness. The specter of my past self, with its mocking echo of my own voice, was a daily confrontation with the mansion, once a fortress of solitude, had become a crucible for transformation. The once intimidating corridors now felt like passages through my own psyche, each step forward a move towards a deeper understanding of myself. The haunting experiences, rather than terrifying, had taken on a more reflective quality, guiding me through the labyrinth of my own conscience. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I began to embrace the hauntings as a necessary part of my journey. The mansion, with its shifting walls and echoing voices, was no longer a prison, but a place of healing and growth. It was as if the house itself was adapting to my transformation, its once menacing presence now a guiding force. In this strange, surreal environment, I continued my quest for redemption, understanding that the path would be lifelong and fraught with challenges. The echoes of my past would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they served as a reminder of the man I once was, and the man I strived to become. As the seasons changed, so did the nature of my existence within the walls of the mansion. The hauntings, once a source of unrelenting terror, had become a surreal part of my daily life, a bizarre yet constant companion on my journey toward redemption. The mansion, with its shifting rooms and whispering walls, seemed to reflect my inner transformation, morphing from a house of horrors into a sanctum of self-discovery. Despite the progress I had made, the specter of my former self continued to haunt me, a relentless reminder of the man I was striving to leave behind. This phantom, once an embodiment of my darkest aspects, had taken on a different role. It no longer sought to torment me but to challenge me, pushing me to confront the uncomfortable truths of my past. One evening, as I sat in my study, the room dimly lit by the flickering flame of a single candle, I felt a familiar presence. The temperature dropped, and the air grew thick with anticipation. I turned to see the specter, my twisted doppelganger, standing in the doorway. But this time, the encounter felt different. There was no malice in its eyes, only a profound sadness, a reflection of my own remorse. We spoke, not with words, but through a shared understanding, a silent conversation between two halves of the same soul. The specter conveyed its message, a culmination of all the hauntings, all the whispered words and shifting shadows. It was a message of forgiveness, not from the world, but from myself. The realization hit me with the force of a revelation. The hauntings were not a punishment but a path to salvation, a way to reconcile with the parts of myself I had long suppressed. The specter, my ghostly twin, was a manifestation of my own conscience, a guide leading me through the darkness of my past and into the light of self-acceptance. With this understanding, the specter slowly faded, its form dissolving into the air, leaving behind a sense of peace that filled the room. I knew that this was not an end but a beginning, the start of a new chapter in my life. The mansion, once a labyrinth of terror, had become a place of reflection and growth. The hauntings had ceased, but their echoes remained, woven into the very fabric of the house, a permanent reminder of the journey I had undertaken. As I walked the halls, now free from the oppressive weight of my past, I understood that the true hauntings were the memories and regrets we carry within us. The mansion, with its shifting rooms and echoing voices, was merely a reflection of my own psyche, a mirror to the soul. In the end, I emerged from the mansion a changed man, no longer burdened by the specter of my former self. The echoes of my past still whispered in the corners of the rooms, but they no longer held power over me. They were simply reminders of the man I once was and the man I had become. The mansion, my once cursed abode, stood as a testament to my transformation, a haunted house turned haven of redemption. And as I stepped outside, into the light of a new dawn, I knew that while the journey was far from over, I was finally on the path to true peace, both within the walls of my home and within myself.